Hi, Miss. So for my creative project, my idea really from the get-go was to recreate, like build the actual printing press and see if I could actually make it print something, which would have been so cool, but I'm not I'm technically challenged when it comes to woodworking and making things work. And coming from a technological age, everything I do is pretty much over the internet and not hands-on. So that didn't work out for me. So I thought wanted to be in TV, not in front of the camera, but just in TV in general. I thought it'd be cool for me to kind of make a video, and then I could edit it, add pictures, and do things that I'm pretty much good at, and for the reasons why I'm in media. And yeah, so this is my creative assignment on the Gutenberg. So who's this Gutenberg person that we all speak of? Well, he was a German blacksmith, obviously, and today he's considered the man of the millennium because of his invention, the printing press, right? And that's like a huge statement. Like, that's huge to call somebody the man of the millennium, right? And that just puts into perspective how important the printing press actually was in his time in 1456 and now in our time in 2012. It was invented in 1456, and it's basically a machine that uses pressure and ink, and it just presses text and numbers onto cloth or paper or whatever was available at the time back then, and then it basically printed whatever they wanted to say onto the piece of paper. And it was also called basically movable type, and that was the start of movable type basically. There's actually a quote that I found online, and it said, which I thought it was crazy, it's basically to just put into perspective how important his invention was, and it said, Gutenberg's invention didn't exist. Columbus could not have found the sea route to India. Martin Luther could have not been so efficacious in spreading his theses, and Shakespeare would have never gained the tremendous popularity of his and even today's time. So it just like puts into a perspective into how important this invention was. And like the whole thing that I thought of while doing this assignment, although it wasn't like really a point of view that we had to come up with a point of view and like express it and prove it, but the the thought of what would life be like without the printing press today. Like, I always think about, like, would we have the telephone? Would we be as smart as we are? Would we be as advanced as we are as a society? And I think these can all be connected into the social impacts of the printing press, but just in a different, like, in the retrospect, basically. First thing that basically the printing press was used for was obviously to print the Bible in 1455, and that went crazy, but it was very expensive to make, right? And that's just what it was used for at first, and to spread the Catholic religion, obviously, and that's what it was first printed for. That's what he first printed was the Bible, so that's just the background information on what it was first used for. The printing press also obviously was used to print things faster, more efficiently, and to basically take a piece of literature that was either handwritten or at that time orally spread and preserve them basically, instead of handwriting things all the time, which was completely expensive. And like, I couldn't imagine what it took somebody to actually handwrite the Bible, and all the pages that it had to take, all the time it had to take, how perfect it probably had to be. So it just made life completely easier, and that's a social impact right there. To just get it right into that, is it made life so much easier. And I say it like that because it's so much definition that it made life so easy, and it created basically an era of basically efficiency. So instead of spending a year or however long it took to handwrite something, it only took however long, a way shorter period of time, to just print it. Although it was more expensive, it was a staple invention and a staple movement in that era, which influenced our era so much. And like, that's exactly what I go back to. What would life be like without the telegraph? So that's just something that I keep in mind. I still can't figure it out because I really don't want to imagine what it would be like, because it would probably be so different, and just, I think life would be so much more difficult, right? I think the biggest social impact that I want to talk about before I end things off is the thought that I believe that the printing press gave society sense of freedom with speech, and it kind of exercised that, and what we know as freedom of speech today, and also freedom of information. I think this is huge. Like, this information is such like a complex thing. If you really think about it, it is. But like, the printing press made information widely available to everybody. So what I mean is, before the printing press, everything was handwritten and was expensive, right? So only the most rich people, the most elite people, the most important people had information, and let's just say they're up here, right? Which means the general public, the lower class people, did not have information. They're down here. Excuse me. So this, like, the thought of this just blows my mind. This means that the people, the lower class people who did not have access to information, had a crazy dependence on those who were higher with the information, right? Because humans need information to survive, which meant they were depending on the higher class people for like to survive, to learn information. But then you can turn that around and say, okay, the people with a higher class have all the information, but is the information that they're teaching the lower class actually true? Because now the lower class people don't have any access to any like secondary sources to see like, oh, are the higher class people telling us the right information? Is what they're telling us correct? Is it a biased way of telling us information? So there's no way of basically connecting lower class, higher class, and seeing if what was being told to each of them was true. Also, not having easy accessibility to information, again back to the higher class people and lower class people, created a hierarchy right there. So people who had all the information were the most important, they were the most looked up to, they were the most respected in a sense, and then the lower class people were like, oh, like, ew, like, I get that's a weird way to put it, but like, it created a hierarchy between the two, right? So I don't know, it's just so scary to think that at one point in time our life kind of was like that. And it kind of brings me back to George Orwell's 1984, where Big Brother, so you can say, went around telling people that ignorance was power and not knowing anything was a good thing, right? And like, I like living in a world now with like ample amounts of information just at my fingertips. I could not imagine what it could have been like back then, knowing absolutely nothing and having no access to books or the internet or Google or anything like that. And to put it into perspective for myself, I decided to go an hour without my cell phone and my laptop and without books or TV or anything, and just kind of like talk to people while I was at school and stuff. And like, oh my gosh, it was crazy. Like, how did I know what people were telling me were true? Because like, if someone told me, oh, like, I don't know, Markham is an hour drive away, I could easily just go on my BlackBerry and be like, how far is Markham away? Go on Google Maps and see if they were right or wrong. But without this, I had to believe exactly what they were saying. But then they could be telling me the wrong information. So it was really scary. And also, like, it made me realize the humans dependent on information and the humans dependent on being involved and knowing what's going on at all times, which is where social media comes in, Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff too, right? So it was really like, I didn't do it for fun. I did it for the sense of the project, because it kind of like, that was it. The social impact of the printing press was that it made information more easily accessible. And I think that's the number one thing. We could talk about 100 social impacts of the printing press, but I think the number one thing is that it gave information to everybody, and that's huge. I think that's absolutely huge.